Hello and welcome to the TwoCanConnect for Xero Salesforce demo. Today we're going to show you how the integration works and how the data syncs between Salesforce and Xero. This integration was designed to be able to create invoices against your opportunities and have them sync both ways with Xero. The first thing that you can see on the home page is that we have some custom Lightning components that will tell you the current sync status and any sync information. You can add these components to any page. The first thing we're going to show you is just to jump into an existing Salesforce account called Bankwest that we've already synced with Xero during our setup, where we can see that we've already got historical invoices coming in from the integration. This means you get to have a full account overview of all of your customers as soon as you set up the integration. I've also just jumped into another account called Tony's Golf Store, who has not yet been synced with Xero. This is a brand new customer that's just been created in Salesforce today with their contact detail. We're going to say that Tony called up over the phone and he ordered some golf balls straight over the phone, and I'm now entering that opportunity into Salesforce and creating an invoice. First of all, I'm going to create the opportunity and enter in all of the details, as you can see here. We're going to save this opportunity and go into it. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to add the products to the opportunity so we can tell what we've sold to Tony's Golf Shop. All of these products have been synced from Xero during our setup process, so everything will be mirrored from your Xero items. So I'm going to select the 3 and the 6 packs of golf balls and enter in the quantities that we sold to Tony's Golf Shops and adjust the price if required. Then going to click Save and we'll see the products added into the opportunity. Now I want to generate the invoice. I can come over to the invoice related list over here and click New Invoice. If there was already some existing contacts that we had mapped between Salesforce and Xero, or if this customer already exists within Xero, we would actually do a search and we would find any of those contacts and list them in this section here. Because this is a brand new customer that we've never dealt with before, we haven't found any contacts against this account, so we're going to create a new one just by clicking Next. We can see on the left-hand side, we've pulled all of the details required from our Salesforce account that we've created to save double data entry. On the right-hand side, we've also listed all of the available contacts on that Salesforce account. So we can see here, we've got Tony Smith, which I'm going to click the plus button for, and we can see it uses his first name, his last name, and the email address that we've set up for that contact. This means that all of that detail will get created in Xero once the invoice then syncs. Once we're happy with all of the data on the page, we simply click Next and we can see that the contact has successfully been stored and ready to sync. We're now in the invoice record. We can see we have the date and the due date of the invoice. In this example, we've mapped some custom fields through our configuration page to automatically pre-fill these dates. We can also enter in custom invoice numbers and custom reference numbers, and we can base any of that data from the information you have stored on your opportunity. So if you've got custom fields that you have on your opportunity for dates or invoice numbers or reference numbers, we can map all of those across to the invoice automatically. We can also select if our amounts are inclusive, exclusive, or have no tax on them per invoice. In our configuration, our default says that these amounts include tax, so we'll leave that as is. The final thing we'll select is our branding theme. The branding themes have also been synced from Xero during our configuration, so I'm going to select the very orange invoice as our branding theme. In our line items, we can see our product name, which we can also customize using custom fields and mapping, our quantity, unit price, discount, our sales accounts, and we also have 2 tracking categories that we're using within Xero. I'm just going to use the region tracking categories for both of these. We can also allow users to change the sales account, but we've disabled that in our configuration because we don't want our users to be able to change the account that these line items are allocated to. But we also do have the option to enable that, so users are able to change those sales accounts. We can also edit our line items. For example, if you needed to change your quantities or change unit prices, specifically just for a deposit invoice as an example, or a progress invoice, we can update those line items as we go along. We can also remove line items if you're not invoicing that particular product at this point in time. The last step to create the invoice is to choose if we're creating a draft or an approved invoice. In our configuration, we can choose which of these buttons appear. So if we only want our users to create draft invoices, we can choose a configuration option to hide the approved invoice button, and vice versa. In this example, I'm going to create an approved invoice. We can now see that the invoice record has been created. With our integration, we automatically sync all of the latest data every 15 minutes as a default. You also have a sync frequency option in the configuration to choose how often Salesforce and Xero sync with each other. Again, our default is 15 minutes. So that means within 15 minutes, this invoice would be created within Xero and then start syncing both ways. That being said, we do have an option available where we can instantly send this to Xero. However, we recommend that you wait for the 15-minute sync. I'm going to click the Send to Xero button, and we can see it's now doing the sync. And we can see we have the success message to say that the record has successfully been stored within Xero. We can tell this invoice has been synced because the invoice URL section is now populating. It means we can click on that URL and we can see the invoice in Xero with all of the data that we've synced over from Salesforce. It's worth noting that if we do use the View Invoice in Xero button, you will still need to have a login to Xero in order to be able to see this page. That means you actually don't need to give access to any of your sales team, as an example, into Xero. They can still create invoices in Salesforce and sync them. They just won't be able to open up Xero and amend any of the data on the Xero side. Once the sync has taken place, we can then download the invoice from Xero using the Download Invoice from Xero button. We can either download it to our computer or we can attach it directly into Salesforce underneath this invoice record. When it's been successfully attached, we can view it in the Related tab where we can see our line items, any payments that have been applied, and also the invoice file. We can then click on that invoice file and we have the very orange invoice that we're sending to our customer. The great thing about this, it means we could actually send this invoice to the customer directly from Salesforce's email function. So I can click into the email section. We can then load any templates that we've created within Salesforce. So I'm going to use a send invoice template that I created earlier. We can also attach a file. Go to Related Files and we can see our invoice there, which we can add. We can now add the customer and we can send the invoice. Here's a preview of the template that we sent out, where we can see we use merge fields such as the invoice number, the amount due, and also the online invoice URL. We can also see our attachment here as well. The online invoice URL is a URL that we store, which can take the customer directly to the invoice online where they can pay it instantly using your preferred payment service. When we've actually sent the invoice, we can then mark it as sent, which will mark it as sent within Xero. The great thing about using the invoice function from within Salesforce is that it also includes tracking to see if the invoice email has been opened and when it was last opened. If there's ever any issues with the invoices, we can then click into the Troubleshooting section, look at our self-diagnosis tool. In this case, we can see that the invoice has been successfully synced with Xero. We can see the time it was last synced. We can see the data quality to make sure there's no problems with what we're entering, and if there's been any errors. If there are any errors, they will appear in the section below. I'm going to give you an example of an error that we're going to force. Just to show you how this tool works, I've purposely changed the currency to an invalid currency in the invoice. The sync has tried to happen again, and we can see we have an error. We've got a database of errors that we've set up within the application. So we can see here it says the organization is not subscribed to the currency AUR. There's been someone go in and manually edit it from AUD to AUR, which is then causing an error. We can also see that it says that you are trying to create an invoice in a currency that's not supported or set up in Xero, and it's either please check your currency set up in Xero or in Salesforce. If you do have a problem, you can go and fix that issue, which we're going to do now by changing the currency back to AUD, which is the correct currency. Then we're going to force this invoice to resync. And we're going to see that it's been successfully stored. We can refresh this component and we're back to no issues. Just popping back into Xero, you can also see that the invoice has been marked as sent. We're going to apply a payment to this invoice now and watch the payment sync happen. So this invoice has now been fully paid by the customer and reconciled. We're now going to wait for the 15-minute sync to complete and come back and look at the invoice within Salesforce. Okay, we can now see that our invoice has been marked as paid, and we also have a different icon for the paid invoice. We can see that all of the amounts have recalculated to show that there's nothing now due on this invoice and the full amount has been paid. The fully paid on date has also synced across. And in our related lists over here, we can also see the payment record in terms of dates, times, and amounts. That brings us to the end of this demonstration. Hope you enjoyed it, and please contact us if there's any questions. Thank you.